Hello and welcome to the Capital Conversation with me, Michael Hayman. Now, my guest today is Alex Petrides, the co-founder of Allplants, the plant-based meal box service delivering natural and healthy frozen food to your door. Founded after an overnight epiphany about the benefits of a plant diet, Alex and his brother JP are fighting to change what we eat and how we live with nature. Let's find out why. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I would like to start with what I believe is a really apt quote, because you once said that my brother and I grew up thinking that veggies ate limp carrots, wore sandals, and talked too much. Now, show us your feet. This man is you're living the brand. You're wearing sandals.
The thing is with sandals, if you've got it, flaunt it. You've got to really go for it. And yeah, I've learned to embrace the sandal philosophy, but at the same time, yeah, that whole dialogue and old state of what it meant to be a vegetarian has totally shifted over.
So I think, in your defence, you've hurt your foot. Right, get it, okay. But to your point is that historically, vegetarians have had, there's been an image, right, that actually it's a sort of non-mainstream thing, but increasingly that's changing, and that's...
Increasingly that's changing, and not just changing, but it's becoming not just reserved for kind of the naturists. It's becoming something that everyone wants to do because it's a good thing for your health, for the planet, and because it's just how we should start to eat a little bit more plants.
But I mean, once upon a time, this was a calling. It was something that you felt you did as a cause. You're turning this into a commercial enterprise with Allplants as a business. You talk about an overnight epiphany. What and why?
Well, for myself, I was actually already working in food, albeit popcorn, so a little bit more frivolous than what I'm doing today. And as I was looking into the supply chain, I started to learn a lot more about where things came from and the impact of every purchase we make, be it as a company, as a business, or as a consumer. And there's such a distance, even today, we talk about transparency, there's such a distance between what realistically happens and what we end up buying.
So that's the carbon footprint.
So from a carbon footprint point of view, everyone I met started to say, oh, well, animal products, obviously just cut them and you drop suddenly a huge amount of that kind of environmental challenging status. So I did my own digging and started to experiment with it.
But this all started with weekly supper clubs, right? In terms of actually bringing... So were they friends? Who were the people you were gathering?
Friends of friends, people we thought could be really interesting and help us learn. Because at the time, we really wanted to just show people, like, wow, look, here's what we found out. You can make these amazing meals. You can use things like jackfruit. You can make a bolognese using walnuts.
So were you cooking? Were you and your brother cooking?
My brother and I were cooking. We had another chef called Nick who was helping us out, and we were running these supper clubs in Stoke Newington. Had about 20 people every supper club, and we're getting feedback and just discussing what it meant to transition from meat to plants.
But when did you realise that you might actually have a bit of a chef in you? I mean, 1 minute you're selling popcorn, the next minute you're kind of concocting brilliant Mediterranean cooking, right?
I love cooking. I love food. Always have. But I'm definitely not a first-rate chef. I'm a kind of, I like eating.
You put that on the boxes. I like eating the food. Not cooked by a first-rate chef.
No. It's just that I'm not our chef. So we have a team of about 30, 40 chefs now. Some of them have been doing some incredible chef work over the last few years, working in Michelin-star restaurants and cooking for very high-profile people, and they're now kind of bringing their learnings and their skills into
the business.
Not just the business, but also into the idea of plant-based innovation.
Right. I mean, just going back though to these sort of like weekly supper clubs. I mean, was there a moment when they turned from being here's a few get-togethers into actually we've got a business here?
It was not ever a moment. So prior to running the supper clubs, my brother and I were always set on, okay, how can we accelerate the move towards a more plant-based world? And the fact of having a commercial enterprise, we just simply believe in the fact that for-profit enterprise is a good way to build a movement.
I mean, interestingly, you've studiously avoided using the word vegan. Why?
Yeah, I mean, we don't shy away from it too much anymore, but because it's kind of taken a new meaning now, I think, in the mainstream. Even this morning in Daily Mail, it said eat a little bit more vegan to live till you're 100 or something like that. But we found, and we still continue to find, that talking about plants, talking about eating more plants, is a lot more colourful, wholesome, vibrant way of thinking about food.
And that is opposed to, say, vegan is seen as more judgmental, or is it seen as...
I mean, you talked about socks and sandals earlier. Yeah, definitely. Right. Judgmental, often kind of placardy, and we don't, that's nothing to do with
So
what
this
we do.
is an attempt to democratise it, right? Open it up to the mainstream.
Yeah, it's an attempt to show people how delicious it can be and say, look, give it a go. And so definitely, yeah, bringing it to the mainstream in a way that's super digestible and makes them feel great.
Now, in terms of what you buy in terms of the business, you buy food, it comes in a box, it's refrigerated. I mean, in terms of that business model, I mean, what got you to that? What got you to, an actual food delivered, ready to go, rather than ingredients like some of your competitors?
It was the supper clubs.
So that was what it was.
In the
right.
supper clubs, we started finishing the supper clubs by offering people to take home meals. And at that time, we had very simple cooler box with frozen meals in them, and they used to sell out every supper club. I was like, oh great, I'll definitely do this at home. I definitely want to try and eat more plants, but I just don't really know how to. I don't really know what I'm going to get, how I'm going to get the right nutrition. And so we started selling them that way. And then we realized, well, wait a second, why don't we stop doing these small scale supper clubs and create a restaurant where we can serve the whole country? And that's really what got us going.
And you've worked hard on the kind of ethical nature of the packaging. I was reading the stuff that you use in terms of recycled materials for the cooling and so on. I mean, that kind of, I guess, more purposeful side is an important part of your business model.
Yeah, totally. It's an important part, I think, of doing business today, is about, having both the kind of, putting the effort in to actually do the right thing. And we've done that since day one, and we'll continue to do it. And we, even recently, we're creating a wholesale shift around what packaging to use because we have new learnings. Right. And that is tough as a small business to suddenly learn that we can kind of make big, significant changes to people's carbon footprint by changing certain things in our packaging. Is something you don't necessarily want to focus on.
We'll go on to the issues, but before we do that, let's talk a bit about the customer, because you've got a reasonably high price point on this product. This is a £50 purchase, right? In terms of each go that people are going through. In terms of where this is aimed at, is this the kind of young, affluent millennial buyer, or is there a more wide sort of a wider group to buy potentially?
Today it's partly that, and it's a slightly older female customer as well who's just looking to live a little bit more healthful.
What's wrong with older men? Do they not?
No, it's usually the women that makes the man twist kind of their dietary choices.
Right.
So actually, that's what we found. Men are
even in 2019.
Yeah, men are definitely more easily swayed by the women. They won't necessarily make the decision themselves because they think that eating meat is quite a masculine form of.
So it's still the sort of macho
It
culture.
exists
still
in a big way,
right?
Bigger than we can imagine.
I mean, in terms of that buyer, I mean, this is not a cheap product. In terms of actually your business pitch, I mean, do you just see this as, well, that's the business we are, or do you see this democratising of plant-based diets as being something you can take further?
So at the moment, it's if you're buying a meal for two, it's £5 per meal. And that's kind of like an average price point for our route today, between £5 and £5.50, which is expensive. But the way we see it, it's a starting place, and we have to start somewhere. We're actually making the food ourselves, and so we have a big kitchen. We're actually building at the moment the biggest plant-based kitchen in the UK, and we're making significant gains on the ability to produce food that's more affordable.
Right.
But
so you're going to take this further now. Okay, two issues that drive this: health and the environment. I mean, in terms of, if you were to pitch us both, we're racing towards the break, but if you were to give us the pitch in terms of why plant-based sort of answers both of those, what would you say?
So from an environmental perspective, scientists say that we have to reduce our meat and dairy consumption by minimum 70% in the next 10 years in order to try and save ourselves from that global warming 1.5 degree rise. And we're becoming more and more aware of the impact of how eating plants reduces your carbon footprint personal by 80%, whereas even if you just eat a local omnivorous diet, you can only really reduce it by 5%. So there's a huge, huge gain we can have from just eating a lot more plants and a lot less meat.
So tick, you can make an environmental contribution. The health benefits?
Health benefits, I mean, everyone would have heard about cholesterol and the cancerous nature of kind of red meat, and also, the fact that eating more plants, have your 5 a day, have more than your 5 a day, has been a big topic for years and years and years. And so this is an opportunity to reduce the amount of meat in your diet and increase the amount of meat.
And obviously you're supplying this frozen. I mean, a lot of people are not fans of frozen food either. I mean, in terms of why that remains healthy, just a last answer on that for me.
In a very layman's terms, if you imagine refrigerating foods versus freezing them, a refrigerator is just a hotter freezer. So essentially, when any food decays, we're decaying it a lot more slowly in the freezer, so it can last longer. And at the same time, if you eat it in the same period, it's a lot fresher. So it locks in the nutrition for longer, essentially.
Got it. Keeping fresh. We'll leave it there, but we're going to be right back. And when we do, we're going to be talking about how All Plants is making an impact in 2 worlds. Firstly, in business, and also the world around us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. My guest today is All Plants co-founder Alex Petrides. Now, Alex, I'd like to give you a quote from your brother who said that we're conscious of the greenwashing that goes on by lots of businesses. What makes the real deal and what makes the fraud, I guess?
It's difficult not to greenwash because there are so many messages that businesses just pick up on. So
when you say greenwashing, what do you mean? Just
using environmental factors to sell, supposedly positive environmental factors to sell a product or service.
But they may not be true.
So, for example, if you look at packaging has been lambasted over the last few months, years even. Plastic being a big problem, people talking about compostable and biodegradable materials being the solution. But realistically, biodegradable materials can't get composted. Composted materials very rarely end up in an actual compost, they end up in landfill. And in landfill, they actually end up producing methane, which is worse than recycling.
Right, okay.
So actually, recycling is
So there's a PR piece and then there's the substance of it. Now, talking of the substance, you are a B Corp. I mean, an ethical business. Tell us a little bit about B Corp and what it is to be a member.
Yeah, B Corporation, basically you have to uphold the highest environmental and ethical standards, and you're audited against that. And it essentially means that you're a business trying to do good, a business with purpose, using. And
this has come over from the US, right?
It's come over from the US, where there are a lot of companies from I think Kickstarter and Patagonia are B Corps. And in the UK, there's a growing tribe of businesses that are trying to be a force for change.
And you founded the business in 2016. You've had 1,000 days at it. I mean, a lot of what your pitch is about that you can make profit from your purpose. That actually what you stand for really does matter. What happens when the rubber hits the road, though, in terms of when you're actually building that business? What are the problems about staying true to what you stand for?
Well, you talked about cost earlier. There are certain things that we have to do because we know ethically and for the environment they're the right things to do, but they're expensive. So, for example, we offer customers the opportunity to send back their box free of charge. We reuse all the materials. That sort of activity is difficult. But it's important to how we grow.
And are consumers happy to pay the premium? Do you get a sense that actually people just say, well, actually, this is the new cost of doing business, that you can't have single-use plastic and lots of things that made things cheap in the past?
There's groups that are, there's groups that aren't, and I think what we're seeing is change at the moment. So people waking up to the fact that actually to do things right by themselves, it might cost a bit more. And that takes time, though. And if you look at it even 3 years ago, people still saw plant-based as vegan socks and sandals. But now it's more of it's just healthy eating, it's ethical eating, it's a good conscious step.
But I mean, your business has had to grow up very, very fast. 70 employees, just raised £7.5 million in Series A funding. I mean, how do you change as an entrepreneur as part of that?
Yeah, I mean, you learn a hell of a lot. But we've had to just be very fixated on our customer, on learning who the people are we're trying to speak to, and about creating those relationships.
So focus is the learning, is it?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Focus.
And what's an example of you not focusing, do you think?
Very good question.
That's my job.
Yeah. An example of not focusing. So we've made very good decisions not to go into retail yet. It will be something we do. We're really excited about it. Getting our product out in every retail store will be a great time for All Plants. But basically not focusing is when we flirt with that idea, start talking to all the retailers because they're talking to us already, and then realise that actually we need to keep building what we're doing because it's great.
I mean, in terms of that focus, is the focus to become a global brand? I mean, is that where this goes?
Absolutely, and not just for the sake of building a global brand. We want to be a global brand that's kind of known for healthy, ethical living, but is kind of its key challenger point is it led the change towards plant-based living.
I mean, a lot of people will say, and this is often the charge laid at purpose-led brands, is that they can't get to that scale because at some point you have to make decisions that you don't like. At some point there are issues to do with supply chain, issues to do with the way you market. I mean, do you accept that, or do you think that actually you could have a purpose-led world winner in
I think
a business like yours?
Absolutely have a winner, and we're onto it. I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't think that. I could easily spend my time doing yoga if I wanted to. I'm fixated on building this brand, as is my brother, and the reason is, a lot of the problems with our supply chain are actually opportunities to reduce costs. A lot of problems with our current food system are actually opportunities to help people live a healthier, more sustainable life. And they're all things that people want. And, the question, I guess, is really, are the incumbents going to get there more quickly? Are they going to make less ethical decisions and beat us? Well, we're ahead of the game. That's why we're raising significant capital to get ahead.
Right. What's it like working with your brother?
Yeah, it's fun, it's challenging, but...
Best thing, worst thing? What's that?
The best thing is that we know each other inside out. So we know when we're serious, we know when we're playful, and we know that we can trust one another. The worst thing is we know how to wind each other up.
Right.
So in difficult situations, there's always that kind of element of knowing how to kind of change
so how does a family business or two brothers working together, when you need to diffuse something, you need to reach a consensus on something, what's the mechanism, what's the learning, I guess?
We try and be very rational, and we just we split the business up and we have different votes on different things, which sounds very pragmatic, but I think if you're moving at the pace we're moving with the focus that we're trying to instill in terms of our culture, that's important.
Do you feel the pressure as a double act in terms of, you've got investors, you've got growth plans? I mean, how do you cope with fast growth and scale?
The best way we're coping with it is by building an amazing team around us, and actually we're very thankful that we have that now. The last few years we've been operating both on fumes before the Series A fund, and also with a skeleton team, if you like, covering many bases. And now we're starting to get to a position where we can trust the people around us to make really bold decisions.
Is there a key hire when you're scaling in terms of what opens the door to the next chapter? And what's the job spec that you've hired that made it possible?
So there are, in terms of pre-Series A, it was very much. There are a few key hires, but only since Series A have we actually made significant moves towards building our senior team, if you like. And there we look at what do we want to build as superpowers. For us, it's making phenomenal food that's affordable to everyone.
So you need a good chef.
So we need
good chef.
Not just a good chef. One good chef doesn't build an army. No, we need a team of good chefs with a variation of skills. From we have now as our COO. He's not only worked in and built Michelin-star restaurants, but he's worked for global hotel chains. He's worked for big industrial production, and he's now doing this as it's him showing that he can give back. That's how he sees it, and that's brilliant.
Do you have to look around the world for influences then, in terms of actually how you because obviously this started as a Mediterranean diet and it's moved on, right? You've got masalas in there, lots of them. I mean, in terms of actually how you make this a world diet, I mean, where do you get your learnings from there?
Well, at the moment, we're super UK focused, so there's a very world-style cuisine within the UK.
Working with. Yeah.
But as we go into new territories, which will happen sort of next year, it's very much about learning what things are their sweet spots, if you like.
I mean, I'm just thinking about the background here. I mean, you spoke about being a Greek Cypriot family. And your grandma as influencers, and you've said when you're a Cypriot, you eat halloumi for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Oh yeah.
And you used to enjoy nothing more than your grandmother's meatballs. Well, those are two big no-nos, aren't they, for your new plant-based diet? Do you miss them?
She still doesn't quite understand that we're plant-based, so she still kind of offers them, tries to kind of force them upon us. But no, she also makes incredible vegetarian food. And actually, I probably wouldn't have been able to do what we've done without learning from her about how to, how to really cook a tomato. You don't know unless you've worked with these Mediterranean grandmas who really just know these incredible things.
And the passion, presumably.
Yeah,
the love
absolutely.
of it.
Love of food, love of bringing people together around food. When we used to grow up, spending a couple of months a year living under her roof, every night was people eating food, maybe 20, 30 people, all their friends playing backgammon. That was the community we brought up in.
And are you never tempted to just, we're not going to,
No,
give us some expose if you're having a Big Mac at some...
There's absolutely halloumi temptations.
Some point. The halloumi temptation, right.
Absolutely. And actually, if, someone by accident sprinkles a bit of cheese on my pasta, I'm not one to kind of throw it in the bin. I'm very accepting. It's just, it's an attempt, it's an effort. And I think that's the point with what we do. It's trying your best.
Okay.
And eating a little bit more veggie because it can do a world of good.
And you've spoken about the London scene for plant-based food. And you've described it as being on fire.
Yeah.
Why?
It's on fire. Because of the amount of people, products, restaurants, just changing their diet. It's as I was saying, it's kind of moved towards, it's just healthy eating means plants now. It means eating less meat, and people are proud of it. People hang their hat on it. Oh yeah, I'm veggie 1 day a week, I'm veggie 3 days a week. It's the thing, and that's just growing. And if you go to any street food, you go to any kind of high street, they've got the vegan signs up saying, try our new vegan burger, this, that, and the other, because it kind of means healthy now, and that's only going to continue. And in the same way that as the environment becomes more of a theme in society, that will be a new way it continues. And then it's just kind of all building towards a plant-based future.
Well, that's a great place to leave it, a plant-based future. Alex, thank you very much for joining us on the Capital Conversation. And that's all we have time for this week. And thanks to my guest, Alex Petrides, one of the 2 brothers behind the meat-free phenomenon, which is All Plants. It's a business with an eye for a growing market, making the most out of the wake-up calls around health and the environment. And if you want to hear more from the founders behind some of our fastest-growing firms, join me again on the next Capital Conversation. I'll see you then.